well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I'm glad you're with us on the program today. Yeah, we are going to be talking a little bit more about Joe Biden and his trip to Monterey Park, California yesterday to announce the unveiling of several new executive orders that really don't do much of anything at all. But it also allowed Joe Biden to once again repeat his call for Congress to ban so-called assault weapons. Yeah, the headline that the president was looking for: Biden on gun control. Do something big. Yeah. And of course, the something big that Biden wants Congress to do is to, quote, ban assault weapons, right? President saying, I'm determined to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Talking to some of those in attendance, including some of the families of victims of the shooting in Monterey Park, California, a state, of course, that already has a ban on so-called assault weapons and large-capacity magazines and universal background checks and background checks for ammunition purchases. And, I could go on. A 10-day waiting period until very recently, may issue concealed carry. We still have a problem with a number of jurisdictions across California charging hundreds of dollars in extraneous fees and administrative costs in order for you to exercise your right to bear arms in self-defense. Yeah, none of California's gun control laws stopped this attack. And in fact, according to the FBI, in 2021, the state with the most active shooting incidents was California, right? But again, this gave Biden the opportunity to stump for a ban that isn't going to pass in Congress, not with Republicans in control of the House anyway. So this ultimately amounted to, in my opinion, exploiting a tragedy in the name of public relations. I wouldn't even say it's public policy because, again, I think Biden knows that his call to ban guns in Congress isn't going anywhere. So this was about public relations, not about public safety. And the same can be said for his executive orders, too, right? We've seen a lot of headlines, big takeaway. Oh, my gosh, more background checks are coming. Honestly, I kind of doubt it. I really do. And if you notice, a lot of the media reports have been very vague about how Biden's directive to the attorney general is actually going to lead to more background checks, right? So under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was passed last August, there was a slight change in defining who is engaged in the business of selling firearms. It used to be, I think the phrase was livelihood and profit. Right now, it's basically if you sell a fire, if you are engaged in the business, or you are engaged in the business of selling firearms, engaged in the business, right, requiring you to get a federal firearms license. If you the livelihood word was dropped. However, the definition of engaged in the business still requires the government to show that individuals were repeatedly buying and reselling firearms for a profit. So you selling a gun from your collection, you selling off your entire firearms collection. And maybe you use the proceeds to buy more guns. That doesn't turn you into a gun dealer. Now, maybe, again, if you sold off your collection, you bought a bunch of new guns, you sold those guns, you bought a bunch of new guns, then maybe the government could say, aha, you are engaged in the business of dealing in firearms and you need an FFL. But by itself, this directive does not increase the number of background checks. And I really don't think it's going to increase the number of FFLs, to be quite honest. This, again, seems to be more bloviation on the part of Biden than anything else. Now, as I wrote at Bearing Arms yesterday, there are a couple of things that do concern me. The directive for the DOD to try to implement gun safety measures through the purchasing of small arms. That's a concern, right? Because that's the Biden administration basically telling the DOD, hey, we want you to be a gun control group. And when you put out your request for proposals, when you put out contracts for small arms, we want you to, I don't know, maybe tell these companies, hey, listen, unless you are no longer selling assault weapons to civilians, unless you stop manufacturing large capacity magazines, you're not going to win this bid, right? That's what they're trying to do. Again, with Republicans in control of the House, I don't think those efforts are going to go far because the House controls the purse strings. And if the DOD decides that it wants to start playing gun control games, well, Republicans can respond by saying, listen, why don't we just yank your funding and you don't get to buy any small arms this next year until you give up your gun control quest, right? Biden also requested that the Federal Trade Commission conduct an investigation and submit a report to the public documenting the firearm industry's marketing practices, which Biden claimed they're marketing to kids. But Biden also said he wants the FTC to investigate the use of military imagery in selling firearms to civilians, which is not a crime, last time I checked, right? And when you have a number of veterans and active duty military members who are exercising their Second Amendment rights, I don't see any issue with trying to appeal to that section of your consumer base. But again, if you're Joe Biden, if you're an anti-gunner, oh my God, it's horrible, right? And of course, they don't want firearms makers to advertise at all, right? They want to make this industry and gun ownership as taboo as possible. But again, I don't know that FTC report's really going to do anything. It's right now you got 3 Democrats, you got 1 Republican. So anything that comes out of the FTC is rightfully going to be seen as a partisan hit piece, designed to go after the firearms industry. I just don't really see a lot of there. And in fact, even the Associated Press in their report said that Biden's action on Tuesday does not change the government policy. Rather, it directs federal agencies to ensure compliance with existing laws and procedures, a typical feature of executive orders issued by presidents when they confront the limits of their own power to act without cooperation from Congress. Second Amendment advocates also panning the executive orders. Second Amendment Foundation's Alan Gottlieb saying that this is going to do nothing to reduce violent crime. National Shooting Sports Foundation issuing a statement saying that Biden's executive orders are either unconstitutional or duplicative of existing law. USCCA, Katie Pointer-Bainey, who's managing director of government affairs for USCCA, says the reality is that nothing in the president's executive order would have done anything to prevent the recent mass shootings in California, Michigan, or elsewhere. It's time for the president and political leaders across the country to have an honest conversation with the American people and acknowledge that there is no legislative fix that will permanently solve the issue of gun violence. Well, certainly the idea that we're going to ban our way to safety, I think, is absolutely absurd. Again, the laws that Biden wants at the federal level are already in place in California and did not prevent the shootings at Monterey Park or in Monterey Park. Did not prevent any of the active shootings in 2021, again, when the state of California led the nation in terms of active shooting incidents. So no, we're not going to ban our way to safety. We're not going to eradicate gun violence by obliterating the right to keep and bear arms in self-defense. And I got to tell you, Biden may have called on Congress to go big, but frankly, he's looking smaller and smaller on this issue. And I think it's pretty telling, frankly, that, Biden's go-to now is to give a speech, issue some executive orders that largely do nothing. And now you've got gun control advocates singing his praises, right? Oh, it's a home run for public safety. That's what John Feinblatt of Everytown said. Is it? I wouldn't even call it a sacrifice bunt, to be honest with you. But I think that gun control advocates and Joe Biden know that really they can talk. In blue states, they can certainly pass their anti-gun agenda, although not as easily as they might think for some of their big ticket items like gun bans. But the tide is turning. Polls have come out showing majority opposition to the types of gun bans that Joe Biden's talking about. In fact, that Quinnipiac poll that came out a couple weeks ago, the largest opposition to a ban on so-called assault weapons came from the youngest voters, those 18 to 24. Now, remember, that's the generation that's supposedly growing up and embracing gun control like never before. Not according to that poll. So Biden's going to continue pontificating. He's going to continue calling for a gun ban. He may very well indeed try to continue to abuse his authority and executive branch authority to try to craft new laws instead of, interpreting existing regulations. We've seen that with the frame and receiver rule. We've seen that with the pistol stabilizing brace rule. And I'm not ruling out other mischief coming from the ATF. But I will say that, again, yesterday's announcement, mostly a lot of nothing, at least as far as I can tell. All right, let's turn our attention to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We will start there with a story, a really big story by the Boston Globe. And I hate to say it because the Boston Globe has been horrible at reporting on Second Amendment issues. The paper itself, not just the editorial board, but the reporters, I think have done a terrible job. They've done a great job at going after legal gun owners and demanding more gun control. But I think they've done a terrible job of covering the Second Amendment, particularly in the wake of the Bruin decision. But I will give them credit where credit is due. And this is a good piece, talking about the suspect who is accused of killing a 13-year-old boy. And they don't have a motive for this. As far as they know, this might have just been random. But the suspect is the subject of a Boston Globe profile. The long sordid history of the man charged in Tyler Lawrence's killing. And, the Boston Globe doesn't acknowledge the failure of all of these states' gun control laws when it comes to this long sordid history with Sean Scarrett, which dates back to 2005. But their report does indicate and does reveal some of the problems that we talk about on this program every day in the criminal justice system. They say that trouble has always clung to Sean Scarrett. Started early with a middle school suspension for bringing a knife to class. Then came a suspended sentence for carjacking and assault and battery with a baseball bat. That was followed by a shoplifting spree at a Somerville Walgreens on a weekday morning in 2005 when a store employee confronted him over the stolen candy, soda, and condoms. The then 16-year-old whipped out a knife and stabbed the man in the chest as witnesses looked on. The boy's rationale for the near-fatal attack: it wasn't his day. In the years since, the Boston Globe writes, Scarrett has assaulted correctional officers, dodged a cocaine trafficking charge, escaped from youth detention workers. He was acquitted on a murder charge, bragged about his violent exploits, and survived gunshot wounds to the chest. Yeah. Despite his many travels through the criminal justice system, the Boston Globe writes, there's no easy answer as to why he was free to walk the streets that day in January when he was allegedly accused of murdering 13-year-old Tyler Lawrence. How he skirted more lengthy prison sentences, according to the Boston Globe's exhaustive court files. In some cases, he was a juvenile. Other times, he was acquitted. And one time, prosecutors dropped a case against him before trial. When you are dealing with somebody who, again, has a lengthy criminal history, what you're going to find is that, there are multiple reasons why individuals can escape consequences for their crimes. In some cases, like this murder charge that Scarrett faced, he was acquitted, right? So this case went to a trial. A jury ruled that the prosecution did not have enough evidence to convict him or to convince the jurors beyond a reasonable doubt that he was guilty of the crime. We might not like that outcome, but we have to accept that as part of the justice system. But when teenagers are getting probation for armed carjackings and assaulting people with baseball bats, that's a concern. And look, that may have happened 18 years ago, right? But we're still seeing these stories today. Just yesterday, remember our recidivist report, the 17-year-old in Wisconsin who's charged with killing a 12-year-old over a pair of designer glasses. The 17-year-old out on felony probation at the time, and according to police, the 17-year-old has 4 adult convictions, 6 adult read-in convictions, and 6 juvenile adjudications. And he was still out on the streets at 17 years of age. These problems are not, right now they are an endemic part of our criminal justice system, but it doesn't have to be that way. Unfortunately, again, when you have politicians who are looking for a gun control solution, they don't want to talk about fixing the criminal justice system the way it needs to be fixed, right? Their fix is, we'll let people out early. Reduce the number of people behind bars. Reduce the number of prisons. Reduce the number of facilities. Well, that's not always going to be the answer. It's great if crime is going down. It's great if we have people, locked away for nonviolent offenses when, maybe there are more appropriate remedies here. But when we have repeat violent offenders who are being spit back out on the street with little to no consequences after they have either been convicted of a crime or, far more frequently, pled guilty to charges, that is the fundamental issue here, at least when it comes to public safety. Today's armed citizen story from Texas, where a liquor store owner shot and killed a burglar inside his store. This was a couple of days ago in Cold Spring, Texas. The San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office says the owner of Frank's liquor store called him early one morning. I think it was actually a week ago, last Wednesday, saying that the business was being burglarized. Authorities say when they were en route, they were told that the person who allegedly had broken into the store had been shot by the owner. When deputies arrived, they found the alleged burglar lying on the floor of the business, single gunshot wound. The man later identified as Jeffrey Gunter, transported to the hospital where he later passed away. Investigators say surveillance footage showed Gunter entering the closed business through a drive-through window, then placing cigarettes and bottles of liquor inside of a bag. The store owner was actually spending the night on the property. He woke up to the sound of an intruder in the store. He spotted Gunter in the storage room and he yelled out. Sheriff's office says that Gunter made a move towards the store owner, and that's when the store owner pulled the trigger, firing that one shot. Owner notified deputies, waited for them to arrive. Authorities say the situation remains under investigation, but at this point, no charges have been filed against the store owner. Sounds like he was acting in self-defense. We'll keep our eyes open and bring you any more details as they become available. Finally today, our good deed of the day, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A 74-year-old in Eugene, Oregon, able to save a woman from a burning hotel. Yeah, this is pretty amazing, I got to tell you. Greg Spike, 74 years old, he goes out on a jog every day. But Tuesday, he said he took a shorter path than he normally takes. By the way, the fact that the 74-year-old is going out for a daily jog makes him a hero in my book. He said, I didn't have much time to go up into the hills. So he's on his running trail in Eugene, and he sees smoke from this hotel fire. It was a 3-alarm fire at the Valley River Inn back on February 28th. Started on the second floor late that morning before spreading up to the third floor. So Spike's there. He pulls out his phone. He's, filming as people do. And then he heard a woman cry out for help. As it turns out, it was a woman named Stacy Barkley, who was visiting family in Eugene. She's actually from Illinois, so she wasn't there, as a resident, but she was there in the room. And when Greg Spike heard her cries, he went to save her. Barkley told USA Today he didn't even hesitate. He ran right over. Pretty incredible. She's in her room. She thought she heard an alarm. She opened the door. She said the hallway was filled with smoke. So she closed the door. She called her husband. Husband says, you got to leave. She said, I didn't know where the fire was. I didn't want to get disoriented. So she followed her husband's advice to close the door, put a towel underneath to try to keep the smoke out. But then when she walked to the balcony, she saw the flames right next to her, basically, from an adjacent room. And that's when she said she started to panic. So she grabbed some belongings, she put on her coat and shoes, she went to the patio door, and she could feel the heat coming out. She said, I was afraid to go out there, but at that point, I wasn't sure what else to do. And that's when she saw Greg Spike. He yelled to her, get out, but she said, smoke, there's too much smoke, I can't. So Greg Spike ran toward the building, told her to drop her bags to him, and then lower herself down. Greg Spike says, I said, come on, hit me. He was trying to tell her that he would break her fall. So she climbed over the railing, lowered herself as much as possible. She actually feel her feet touching his uplifted hands. He said, jump. So I did. And he was there to save me. It's incredible. Barkley's daughter ended up reaching out to Greg Spike's son. Barkley said that's how he got in contact with Greg in the local news. She was able to reunite with Greg, at least virtually speaking. Greg Spike He's already been commended for his actions by the Eugene Springfield Fire Department. He said, what really hit me was she said it kept going through her mind that she would never see her unborn grandson. Well, now she does. And it's all because Greg Spike was in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing to help a stranger who desperately needed his time and attention. So, Greg Spike, we thank you, sir, for your very, very good deed. And that is all the time we've got for you in this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company, but I do want to thank you for being a part of the program as always, and I'm looking forward to spending more time with you again tomorrow. Don't forget, we also have our VIP Gold live chat, which happens every Wednesday. By the time you see this, you'll be able to watch it on demand if you're a VIP Gold member, but you'll miss out on the live show, unless, of course, you become a VIP Gold member yourself. And next week, you can take part in the live chat. All you have to do, go to bearingarms.com/subscribe, use the promo code GUNRIGHTS, and you can get a significant savings on either your VIP or VIP Gold membership. And as our way of saying thanks for showing your support, we're going to give you exclusive content, news stories and analysis you won't find anywhere else, because your support really does matter, and it really does make a difference. So thank you for doing it. Enjoy the rest of your Hump Day Wednesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.